Hi everybody, and welcome back to Sew Along with Jan and part 3 of the November Kimberbell Mini Quilt. So we're going to put together our little mini quilt tonight. It's evening when I'm doing this, and the little quilt just has 4 blocks, so it won't take very long to put this one together. We'll do some stitching in the ditch, and we're going to put the backing on, and then we're going to put the binding on. And I also like to put the sleeve. So let's talk a little bit about what we'll need to put our mini quilt together. So we've got our 4 blocks here. Okay, so here's all my blocks all completed, and we'll be sewing these together. And then we also need the backing, and here's my backing. It's 14 inches square, and then I like to put shape flex on the back, and the shape flex keeps it, so when you do the stitching in the ditch, it just keeps it from getting wrinkly. So I have my shape flex on the back of my 14-inch piece for my backing. And then I also have my binding, and I have cut my binding 2 1/4 inches and then sewn it together and folded it in half, ironed it, pressed it in half. So I already have made my binding. It does call for 2 1/2 inch binding, and if you prefer 2 1/2 inch binding, that's absolutely fine, but I like 2 1/4. And then the one little thing that I do that's different is I put this little sleeve on the back to hang it in my little hanger. So what I have done is I've cut a piece of fabric 6 inches wide and 12 inches long, and then I marked a 1/2 inch on one side on each end. Okay, marked a 1/2 inch in from the corner, and then I cut it with the rotary cutter by putting the mark on the 1/2 inch or the ruler on the 1/2 inch mark and then cutting it down to the corner. So the top of this is going to be 11 inches now, and then the bottom is 12 inches, and then you fold it in a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to hem this. I haven't hemmed it yet. I always like to show it to everybody the way I do this. And then what we'll do once I hem it, then I'm going to press it in half like this. Okay, and go, give me a second. I have to grab my heat and bond. Give me just a second. Sorry about that. I'm always forgetting something when I'm doing this, and it's usually the heat and bond for some reason. So I made a strip. I cut a strip of heat and bond ultra hold. This is the permanent bond, and I cut it about 3/4 of an inch wide and about 11 inches long. And so we're going to actually adhere that to the bottom of our little sleeve here, and I'll show you that in a little bit once I hem this. I'm going to hem it. We'll fold it in half, and then that heat and bond is going to be pressed along the folded edge down here at the bottom, and that will what will hold the sleeve on the back of the quilt. And plus then the raw edge will be in the seam, and the rest of it will be held on with the heat and bond. So I'll do that in a minute, but this is 3/4 of an inch by about 11 inches long, so I can trim it off when I need to. So that's heat and bond ultra, so you'll need that also. So we'll put this over here. Okay, so now we're going to sew together our blocks. So I've got, let's see, I've got my cotton, my Pima cotton thread in. I just put white in because the blocks are white. And I think I'll even stitch in the ditch with white this time. Sometimes I stitch in the ditch with monofilament, and that would work too. But since it's white, I might be able just to do it in white. So we'll see when I get there if I decide to use the monofilament or not. Okay, so we're just going to sew these together. So it shows us in the book here. This is on page 13, how to put the blocks together. So I'm going to put the little turkey next to the gourd. So we're going to do these two together first. And give me a second. I'm going to grab some pins here. We're going to do a 1/4 inch seam. So I have my machine on the Q tab. I have the Luminaire. Most of the Brother and Baby Lock machines have a Q tab now, and I have Q02, which is my 1/4 inch piecing stitch. That way I can leave my J foot on. And I like that because then I don't have to change the foot, because I will need to zigzag and stuff in a little bit. So we're going to sew these first two together, and we're going to do our 1/4 inch seam. So to do the 1/4 inch seam with Q02, you're going to run your fabric right along the edge of this foot here, because it's slightly moved. By choosing that stitch, it's moved the needle slightly to the right. So it's at the 5.5 position, and that makes it a 1/4 inch from the right edge of the foot. So we're just going to sew these together at a 1/4 inch. Just got that white thread in the needle and in the bobbin. So we'll do these two, and then we'll also press the seams open. This one doesn't take very long. It doesn't have so many blocks to sew together. I remember a couple of them had like 10 blocks, so it took a little bit to get those all sewn together. Okay, so here's the first 2 blocks. Those look good. And then we're going to put these 2 blocks here. So now these 2, the second row is going to be the pumpkin and then the give thanks. So here's the pumpkin block and the give thanks. Make sure we're getting them right here. That looks right. Okay, so we're going to put this together like this. And we will pin these together. I like to put a few pins in. It's just a little easier to keep them from scooting on you. They're a little thick with the batting in there. All right, and then we're going to pin these together. All right, now do our 1/4 inch seam on this one. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'll get up and just pause the camera for a minute while I'm going to press the seams open so that before I sew the 2 rows together. That way the seams are nice and flat and will go together nicely and won't have any more bulk than is necessary. All right, so we're gonna go like that and cut. All right, so I think this one looks good. There we go. So there are our 2 rows. So I'm going to go and press these open, press my seams open so they're nice and flat, and then we will sew the 2 rows together. Okay, so I've got my seams all pressed open nice and flat here, and we're going to go ahead and sew these 2 rows together then. So let's see, make sure we get it right. Yeah, this is right. So with the turkeys up in the top left-hand corner here. All right, so we're going to get these seams all lined up here in the center, hopefully. And I like to put a pin on each side because it just holds everything put for me. And then we'll sew this one together. Let's see here. These are nice big blocks. It's fun to do. A few of these have had a lot of blocks, so it's been kind of fun to do. There's 2 or 3 of them that only had like 4 blocks, so it is really nice to have less blocks this time, so it doesn't take so long to sew together. And some of them just had filler blocks, so they've had a nice variety of different patterns. All right, so let's go ahead and get this one lined up. I'm still going to use Q02. And whoops, I think I need to go ahead a stitch or so and tie it off here. And we're going to sew this one together. And then we'll do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and press our seams open so that they're nice and flat. So I'm going to be really careful. These are those magic pins, and they're called extra fine patchwork. And sometimes I just need to sew over a pin to hold something in place. And these are so soft. I would never recommend this with any other pins. I've been looking for pins for years that are very soft that I could, occasionally I need to sew over a pin. So these are a special pin. They're up on our Shield Sewing Center website, but they're called magic pins. Extra fine patchwork is the model. And they are wonderful. I throw away a lot of pins because if you sew over them, see, they bend. They're so soft. I mean, I can just go like this and see how easy that bends. So if you hit one, it's very unlikely it's going to do anything to your machine. But again, never do that with any other standard pin. Those are very special pins. Alrighty. So there are our 4 blocks. I'm going to get up and I'm going to press these, and then we're going to get ready to put the backing on. Okay, so we're ready for some backing here. I've got my backing ready, and I have shape flex on the back to keep it from puckering when I do the stitching in the ditch. So I'm going to put the pretty side down against my sewing machine, and I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do to pin base these. I like to use safety pins, and I'll take this over to my cutting table to do this, but then you can kind of see what you do. I'm just going to line it up, okay, on my backing. I've got the pretty side down, so it'll show on the back. And I'm just going to kind of center it the best I can on there. And then I have my basting pins. These are safety pins. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to kind of start in the center, and I'm just going to pin baste this through the blocks. Now, what I like to do is keep the pins away from the seam as best I can, so that I don't have to move the pins in order to do the stitching in the ditch. So I try to keep them kind of so that I can move them a little bit. And I'll probably put 2, maybe 3 pins. Well, these are pretty good sized blocks, so I might put 4 pins in each block because they're pretty good sized blocks. And we don't want the fabric on the backing to pucker on us or get folded or anything. So I'm just going to do the pin basting. And you can see how I'm kind of staying away from the applique and stuff, and I'm staying away from the seam lines so that I can stitch down through those. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take this over to my to my cutting table. It's a little easier to get it all done. And I'm going to put pins in all 4 blocks so that I'm ready to go. And then we'll come back and we'll do the stitching in the ditch. Okay. So we're going to stitch in the ditch, and that means that we're going to stitch right down through the seam. Okay. Going this way and the other one going this way. There's only 4 blocks this time, so we don't have to do too much stitching. I am just going to leave the white thread in. Since this is white, it's not going to show. Lots of times I use monofilament, and I do that because often, you know, the blocks are all different colors, and since these are all white, the white thread should be fine. So I have moved my needle to the center needle position on the Q tab. It's Q01. I'm also going to make the length of my stitch just a little longer to 3.0, since we're going to be going through quite a bit of bulk here. And we're just going to start up here at the top. Now I'm just going to leave my J-foot on. I find this easier for me than you could do like a stitch in the ditch foot. You can do an open toe foot. I like the little notch in the middle of this J-foot, and that helps me stay right along this little seam allowance here. So I'm just going to be careful. Sorry, I keep hitting the camera. I have to get it just right so that my elbow will go over it. And I'm just going to stitch with that little bit longer stitch right down that seam. And this is stitching in the ditch. You just stitch right down. Whoops, second here. I got to get this pin out of the way here. That's why I like to try to keep the pins as, you know, out of the seam allowance so I can manipulate them and not have to take them out while I'm working here. All right, so now we're down at the bottom. And that little longer seam, or that little longer stitch length helps when you're doing this, so that it moves along a little bit. Goes through all that extra bulk because, you know, we've got the seam we're going through there. All right, so we're going to come down here, and then we're going to tie off. So we got one done. So we're going to turn it over and do the other side. And cut. And then do this side. Oops. Get it all lined up again. I like that little notch because that little notch is right in the center with the center needle position, and then I know where I'm stitching for my seam. So if it works better for you to use the stitch in the ditch foot's really kind of cool. It has that little tine in the middle, and that works really good. I just so often have my J foot out, and I just use that. I think I have a stitch in the ditch foot. I'll have to look, because that was one you have to buy extra. It doesn't come with most of the machines. I can't remember if I have one or not. I know I have one for my walking foot. These machines feed really well, so I don't usually have to put a walking foot on to do this, because they feed really well. And you can see it's doing a very good job. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go up here. We're going to tie off. So then we got our stitching in the ditch done. Right, cut. Move this down just a little bit closer, hopefully. And now what I like to do is I like to leave my needle in the center needle position, and then we're going to stitch all the way around the outside edge. But then there's actually 2 notches on this foot. The other one's over here by the edge of the zigzag opening. And if I put the needle in the center and I run the fabric right along the outside, the right hand notch, that's kind of about 1/8 of an inch. So it's a nice kind of a top stitch. And I use that then to do the outside edge. And I just want to sew all the way around the outside edge just to hold everything together along the edge. When we get ready to put the binding on, it'll be way easier to get the binding on, so stuff won't be flapping around on us. So I've got the needle in the center and my notch, I'm running it right along the edge of the fabric here. We're just going to go all the way around just to give it a little bonus. It's going to hold it a little bit better. Okay, whoops, looks like I got a little exuberant there, so we better back over a little bit. There we go. Move it down the side. See if I do better on this corner. Sometimes I don't do too well on the corners when I'm doing 1/8 of an inch. It's a little different to judge because I'm used to judging the 1/4 inch real easily, but you know, you do it all the time, but the 1/8 inch I have to think a little bit harder about it. Let's see if I do better this time. That looks better. Well, I still got it a little too far. Oh well. Back over a little bit. There we go. And this is going to be under the binding anyway. That's why I like to use the 1/8 inch, because then it is under the binding, but it just gives you something to hold everything together. Sometimes that back can flap, and then you go to sew your binding on and it's not in the seam. I've done that many times. So I've learned that if I go around the edge, it really helps. Okay. Let's see if we can get around this. Oh, this corner I did pretty well. I did pretty well in this corner. There we go. So I'm just doing 1/8 of an inch. It's going to hold all this together. And you could, like I said, you could also do this with your monofilament. I like to use the Transpill monofilament. And we have that up on ShieldSewingCenter.com. I'll link all this stuff. The Transpill is wonderful monofilament. It's very difficult to find good monofilament that runs through machines well. And I really like it. Okay. So there is our top that's all ready then to have the binding put on. So when I turn this over, see, you can see my stitching on the back. And the thing I like about the putting that shape flex on, see how the back is nice and flat then. So that really helps keep it flat so it doesn't like pucker up around, where I've stitched here. So, all right, so now I'm going to go take this over to my cutting table again, and I'm going to just put my ruler right along the edge of the little quilt, and I'm going to trim the rest of the backing off so that it's even with the quilt, and take all the pins out. And then we're going to get ready to put our binding on and our little sleeve. Okay, so I've got it all trimmed and it's ready to have the binding put on. So the first thing we need to do is put the little sleeve on. So this is my sleeve. I went ahead while the camera was off and just hemmed the ends here. And then I folded it in half so the two raw edges are together. Now you see that the one side is narrower than the other. So this is the side, the skinnier side is going to go against the back of the little quilt. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to fold this in half so I know where the center of the little sleeve is here. And we're just going to put a pin in there. And then again, that skinny part, and then I ironed my heat and bond to the bottom where the fold is. And then I'm just going to put the pin on the center. We know where the center is since we just have the 4 blocks. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the raw edges together here and put this on the back of the quilt. And then again, the skinnier end, you can see this is narrower that way. And then my heat and bond is going to be against the back there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get these pinned on, and then we'll be sewing this into the binding of the top here. So we will press the heat and bond to the bottom to hold it together so that we have a little sleeve to put on the hanger. I like that little hanger. So it's going to be fun to have something to put in my hanger every month, because I had this nice hanger that I had at my dad's, but I only had a couple things to hang in it, and now I'll have something for every month. All right, so we're going to put that there like that. So that's on the top of the quilt. Hopefully I got it on the right part. We want it on the top. And it's right side up, so that's always a good sign, right? Okay, then I'm going to put a couple of pins. I'm just going to put a couple little pins down here just so this little thing won't flop up on me and have me get it caught in the binding or something. This is the open part of the sleeve, so we'll just put a couple pins in here just to hold it down. There we go. Okay. So I am going to be using, doing my binding by machine. So depending on if you're going to be sewing it down with the machine or if you're going to sew it down by hand, it depends on how you put it on. So I'm going to be putting my binding on the back of the little quilt and turning it to the front to stitch it down. If you want to hand stitch it down, you would put it on the front of the quilt, turn it to the back, and hand stitch it on the back. So we're going to be working on the back here, and I like to start at the bottom. Pretty sure we got that right. Yeah. I've got to check. It's a little late in the evening, so you know sometimes you just got to check to make sure. All right, so this is always everybody's hardest part about binding. So I have this wonderful little document that I was given years and years ago called Bind Aid, and I have it up. I'll give you the link to it. And what was nice about Bind Aid is that it taught me how to do binding that's continuous and how to do the little flip at the ends that everything looks beautiful. So I will link that in the video, in the description of the video below, so that you can get that bind aid if you've never done this. But I wanted to do binding on all of these so that everybody could see the binding multiple times. It's always nice to see binding done, and I do it different ways. Maybe a little different than other people do. I find that sewing it on with the machine works best for me, and then I also found that a straight stitch doesn't work for me as well as a zigzag stitch. So I actually stitch mine down with a zigzag. Okay, so and I'm also using 2 1/4 inch binding, just to remind you. I do have this really pretty good matching gray thread, so we're going to use that to put this down. May have to go get my glasses to do the zigzagging though. So I'm going to put this down. I've got this is the end where we're starting here, and I'm going to leave a little opening, you know, and I'm going to kind of go down here towards the corner. Get my thread under my foot. And then we're going to go back to Q02 on the machine. That's going to bring our needle back over to the 1/4 inch piecing position. And I'm going to drop my needle and tie a knot right there. I'm about, couple 3 inches from the end. And I'm going to go up to the end of this side, and I'm going to stop about 1/4 inch from the corner. You can certainly measure that if you want to. I've kind of gotten so that I can just judge it, so I don't normally mark it. I'm going to cut. I tied off, and then I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to go up to, with this side, I'm going to do a 45-degree angle to the corner, so the corner's right here, okay? Line those up, and then I want to get a nice 45-degree angle. Then I'm going to bring this straight down and line up my raw edges again to get that beautiful corner. Get everything lined up, and then we're going to do the same thing on this one. We're going to continue with our 1/4 inch seam, and you do sew from the very edge. So I just have it right on the very edge, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch all the way to the other corner, and we're going to do the same thing. We'll do that turn. Just a second, get this in here a little bit further. And I'm just lining it up. And we're going to go all the way around this way. So this little quilt's pretty small, so it doesn't take very long to get the binding on. So on this one, I'm going to make sure I can find the edge. I always end up, must be just the size of the binding. I always end up with a seam in my corner, which is sometimes a little hard, but it'll be fine. All right. So we're going to go up here to about 1/4 inch from the end. We're going to tie off and cut. And we're going to turn. We're going to go up at a 45-degree angle to the corner here. Here's the corner. Get our raw edges all beautifully lined up, and then come straight down like that. And now we're going to be sewing over that binding or that little sleeve too, just so you know. So it's going to be a little thicker in here, but it will be fine. So we're going to sew over into our sleeve. Just a second here. I'm going to pull some pins as I'm going here. Keeping my 1/4 inch seam. Give me just a second. I think I'm going to like this binding. I wasn't sure. I didn't have, they had kind of a neat binding on it, like a little polka dot binding, and I didn't have anything with polka dots, but this is pretty. I was looking for something that was a little darker gray. So we're going to go up to this side. We're just about to the end here. I'm going to do the same thing. Stop a 1/4 inch from the edge. And then we'll turn the corner again. Okay, tie off. And you're going to cut. Get my pins out of the way so I don't drop them all on the floor. All right, so it looks good. So then we're going to bring this up, get our beautiful corner again. Here's the corner of the quilt, and we're going to line this up at a 45-degree angle, get our raw edges all lined up, and bring it straight down. And line everything up. That looks, oops, I'm a little off at the top here. Just a second. There we go. And then we're going to put the needle right in the very edge, tie off, and then we're going to go on down this side. Now, if you want to, again, if you want to hand sew your binding down, you would be doing this on the front of your mini quilt. Since I'm doing it with the sewing machine, I'm doing this on the back. All right, so I'm going to go down this side. Get down to the corner. Stop about a 1/4 inch from the corner. Okay. Tie it off. Cut. And then we're going to turn it again, and then we're going to go up at a 45-degree angle to the corner right here. Make our beautiful corner. Oop, got to get it all straight. I'm a little crooked here. And then get all of the raw edges even and bring it straight down. Okay, now we're not going to go around the corner too far because I want to have enough room to get the little flip done. So that's the next part we're going to do. So I'm going to tie this off, and I'm just going to go in just maybe an inch or so down the corner so that I have enough room to work here. So we'll just go in a couple of inches, and yeah, I think that'll be good. And then we'll tie off here. All right, and cut again. All right, so now we're ready for that little flip. Now this is the part that everybody always tells me they struggle with. So in this bind aid, there's great pictures, and so this is how it taught me how to do it. So what I do is this is the end that we just ended with, okay, and I'm just going to kind of fold this down like this to get it out of my way so it's laying flat. Then this is the tail where we started. I'm going to lay it over the top and crisscross them so they're laying on top of each other right there. So since I'm using 2 1/4 inch binding, just a second, I got to find my hem gauge. Oops, that's my old one. I don't like that one as well. Here we go. And then I might need a marking pen here in a minute. I'm going to take my hem gauge and I'm going to measure 2 1/4 inches from the edge to back this way, because they need to overlap 2 1/4 inches. If you're using 2.5 inch binding, it will overlap 2.5 inches. So I'm going to measure 2 1/4, and then I'm going to put a pin in the back piece of the binding that's laying flat against the little quilt. Put a pin in there at 2 1/4 inches. So I'm just going to put the pin in, and then we'll just remeasure to make sure that it's an accurate measurement. So they should overlap each other 2 1/4 or 2.5 if you're using 2.5 inch binding. That looks good. Okay. So then I'm going to take this is the end where we just ended. I'm going to fold this back on the pin there, and we're just going to cut this off. And then they will overlap 2 1/4 inches. Get this, get the scissors. We're just going to cut this up. Okay. There we go. So now we have an overlap of 2 1/4 inches. Okay. So this is always the tricky part. So it isn't really that tricky if you just kind of do it a step at a time. So I'm going to take the left-hand piece and I'm going to lay it down at a 45-degree angle, just like we did in the corners, like this. Okay. I'm going to take the top piece, this piece here that we just ended with. I'm going to lay this one, and this is the right-hand piece. I'm going to lay this on the back of the quilt with the pretty side up like that. And I'm open, and you notice I opened it up so it's flat. Okay. Then what we need to do is we need to continue this one in the same direction. So we started it down this way, and we need to continue in the same direction. But in the meantime, I'm going to grab this open so that I start opening it, and I'm going to continue turning it in the same direction. So it's going to look weird when you get it up here. And then when you put these together, this fold and this fold are perpendicular to each other. So they're going to kind of make an X. You're going to put the corners together like this, and then we're going to pin these corners together. But in the pictures, it's really easy to see this in that binding. And I, for a long time, I had to get it out and really look at the pictures every time. But now I've done it enough times that I don't need to do that anymore. Okay, so we're going to get these. I like to put like 3 pins in. Sorry, I have to put my arm in the camera. Didn't mean to. Okay, we're going to put a pin there, and then we're going to go over here. And oops, here. And put a pin over here, so that all 3 corners are done. Okay, so then we have to sew corner to corner to get that last seam in there. So I'm going to take my marking pen so I can see the corner, because the one side, the corner is going to be underneath and you can't see it very well. So I like to mark where I need to start. So I'm going to mark the corner right there. Okay, and then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to mark this corner. You can see this one, but it's nice to have the marks there. If you want to, you can actually draw the mark all the way across with a ruler if you want to, but I usually just eyeball it. It's not very far. You don't have to go very far. So then we're going to kind of fold our little quilt in half there, and so we can get this nice and flat. So you can see my 2 marks. I got a mark here and a mark here. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to Q01, and that's going to bring my needle back to my center needle position. And I'm going to put my needle right down on that mark on the corner, take a couple stitches in, okay, and then get everything nice and flat. And I'm going to go right to this other mark over here. So we're just going to stitch straight forward to this other mark, like that. Okay, and then we're going to cut, and that will stitch the end together. And if you don't want to, you don't have to trim it right away. If you want to check it to make sure everything lays flat, and it does. It looks weird with the pins in it, but it's nice to, before you unpin, to check it just to make sure you got it right, and then you can trim. So I think we're good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim this piece of fabric out. And this one we can just finger press. I usually press the others with an iron, but this one I usually just finger press, so I don't have to get up while I'm putting on my binding. Okay, then we're going to see lays nice and flat like that. Okay, then this one I always like to pin to make sure that I can, if there's a little bit of fullness, which there is just a little bit of fullness, then I can kind of pin and take that fullness up just a little bit. So we're just going to work this in and pin it, and then we'll stitch the rest of the binding down. And it's all in one piece now. Isn't that awesome the way that works? I've done a lot of binding, and I'm getting much better at it. And just take your time. So I like to make sure I put a pin where I started and stopped right there. You probably can't see it very well with this gray thread. I'm going to have to go get my glasses. It's nighttime, so it's like about 9 o'clock, and it's very dark outside, and it's a little darker in my sewing room. All right, so we'll get this all lined up here. Second. And then we're going to stitch this together. So I'm going to go back to Q02, and we're going to put the needle back over to the right for a 1/4 inch seam. And then we will tie off, and then we'll stitch the rest of the binding on. So this is going to be the end of our, all the binding will be on, and then we're going to flip it and we're going to sew it on the front. So what I'm going to do when we get done here, I think, I even got worked all there was just a little bit of fullness, and I think I got it all worked in. It looks pretty good. Okay, so we're going to tie this off. And there we go. So we'll pull these pins out. Oops, find my pin cushion. And we'll get these all out. And now the next step is I'm going to take this over to my ironing table. And this is the trick with doing binding by machine. We want this seam back here. Normally when we do it on the front and we flip it over to the back, we don't press this. But when you're doing this with the sewing machine, you need to have a very crisp seam here. So I'm going to take this over to my ironing board, and I am going to press this open with a very crisp seam. Make sure you get into the corners, and then we're going to turn this and we're going to stitch it on the front right here down to the front. Okay, so I'll be right back. I'm going to go do my pressing, and I may do a couple of pins too, so then I'll show you how to pin the corners so that they're beautiful when you get done. So, all right, I'll be right back. Okay, so we're ready to make our corners. We also have to have beautiful corners on the front, of course. So I have taken some clover clips and I've clipped all the way around, just on each corner. So I've just used 8 clips, and I'd even do this on big quilts, that I put a clip on either side of the corner, and then I need to put a pin in this corner to keep this corner nice and beautiful and 45 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the binding right up to the stitching line. You can see it pretty well on here because it's in gray, so you can see it pretty well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumb. I'm going to get a pin here first. Whoops, this one's kind of crooked. There we go. I have a lot of bent pins. I need to go through my pin cushion. All right, so I'm going to go up on the right-hand side of the corner, and I'm going to put my thumb up into the corner and make a 45-degree angle up here, okay? Then I'm going to take that and come straight down and leave the corner right in the corner where the 2 lines meet, where we did our, and I'm going to put a pin in there, and it makes that beautiful corner on the front. So that way, when we go to stitch it down, we'll have these beautiful corners. So you just make your corner, push your thumb up on the right-hand side, make the 45-degree angle down here, and bring it straight down to the other side where the stitching line is, and it will line right up. So it looks good. So the rest of it, I'm not going to pin or to clip. I'll just do the 8 clips and the 4 pins. Excuse me. I think I need a drink of water. Okay. So now we're going to use the zigzag, and we're going to zigzag our binding down. Now the binding is gray, and I have this gray thread that almost matches it perfectly, so I'm going to use that. Sometimes I use monofilament also with the binding if I'm having trouble matching it. You want the thread to really match your binding well, or monofilament works well. So we're going to use this gray thread because it's pretty good. So, and we're going to go over to, I'll show you what I'm going to do for the stitch. I'm going to use a zigzag stitch, and I'm going to go back to my number 1 tab, and I have a zigzag I always use. It's 1-10. And what I do is I save that one with the width that I want and the length that I want for my binding. So the width is going to be 2.0 and the length is going to be 1.4. So it's going to be real narrow and then kind of medium length this way. Okay, so that's what I use, 2.0 and 1.4 for the length. Okay, so when we do this zigzagging, I'm going to start down here at the bottom. Oops. Second here, I got to get the little pan out of the way. Here we go. Got too much stuff up here. Get rid of a couple things. All right. So I'm going to bring my binding up to the stitching line that we put it down with, and I just want to cover that line up with the fold of my binding. Okay. And I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to, again, use that little notch in the center of my foot right here, and I'm going to put that notch down right on the fold of my binding. Okay, so that notch is right on the fold of my binding. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my needle, and the right hand zig is going to be on the binding, and the left hand zag is going to be off the binding. And you're going to continue around. I'm going to tie this off right there. And you're going to hold the binding right up, just cover the line. So the right hand zig is on the binding and the left hand zag is off the binding. And I'm just going to line this up. This one's a little easier than some of them because I can see the stitching line pretty well. Some of the stitching lines, it's harder to see if it's real matchy. Everything's real matchy. This is gray, so I can see it on the white. Second here, I'm having trouble. I sew a lot with my embroidery unit on, so my this quilt is just the right size to catch in my embroidery unit all the time. So if I'm fiddling with it, you know why. But I don't like to have to take the embroidery unit off all the time. So I'm going to take this clip out now. And what I do is I like to take my finger and pull it back in the corner here and get it all lined up. And that way it's snug and it's going to fit into the corner well. All right. We're just going to zigzag right up to the corner. And again, you can do this with a straight stitch if you like. I just find that none of my straight stitches ever look straight. But the zigzag always looks straight. So I don't know why. It must just be because it's not a straight stitch. So we're going to zigzag up into the corner very slowly. Remember that pin's there, but we need to leave it there. Otherwise it won't line up. Okay. Now I noticed that my notch is over to the right a little bit too far. So to fix that, we want it to be right on the edge, right? So I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to raise my needle, and I'm just going to slightly slide it to the left so that the notch is right down, and I'm going to drop my needle again. And that way it's right on the edge of my binding. So that's the way you fix it if you overshoot it, because I'm always overshooting it. All right, so I'm going to line up all my binding here. And then I'm going to zigzag out of the corner and come up the other side. There we go. And then you just keep going, and we're going to do another corner here. And I've gotten so I can do this pretty fast now. But take your time. Don't be in a hurry if the zigzagging is hard. It helps me to put my glasses on because then I can see the edge better. Especially with this darker gray. Makes it a little harder. Just a second, I'm catching on my little clip over here. All right, so I'm lining it all up. It's looking pretty good. I think the color looks pretty good. It's a little bit lighter than the dark color gray, but it matches the other gray really well, so I think it'll be okay. Don't think it'll show that much. Okay, so we'll get this all lined up. Again, I've got my finger in the corner here so that I can pull it straighter. And if you kind of spread your fingers apart, it helps to hold it down. Okay, a second here. I'm stuck again. Make sure I can get that lined up. And we're going to zigzag into the corner. So I think it looks like I'm going to have to move my pin a little bit. Now remember, be very careful with the pin, but if you take it out, it will never line up. Then we're going to go around the corner. Now I do have my pivot feature on, so you notice that my foot raises when my needle drops, and that really is helpful with doing this. Now I did overshoot it again, so I'm going to drop my foot, I'm going to raise my needle, and then I'm just going to slide over to the left till my notch is on the edge of my binding. That looks pretty good. I got to get this one lined up. All right, so we're going to zigzag out of the corner. So remember, right hand zig is on the binding, the left hand zag is just off of it. So I am getting better at it. My binding's starting to look way better now. You know, it takes a little practice. And I do a lot of binding, especially this little stuff. These are good things to practice on because they don't take too long to do. They're small. Okay, getting closer here. How are we doing on our, oh, we're doing well on our video. I like to show you the whole thing if I can. Just, I don't like to make it too long, the videos, but I know that people like to see the whole process. And sometimes it's nice just to see the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to put my finger in that corner again and pull back so that everything is nice and straight there into the corner. I'm going to kind of spread my fingers apart. Okay, looking pretty good. Let me pull this pin head back. All right, so we're going to zigzag into the corner. Now this is the corner I always get the seam in, you know, because you have to have a seam in your corner to make it bulkier, but it worked out okay. All right. So, oh my gosh, I even got this one pretty good. When I went around the corner, I don't have to adjust. So I did pretty well with this one. All right, so let's get this one lined up here. Like that. Come out of the corner. Right hand zig is on the binding. Left hand zag is off the binding. And some people do this with even a narrower zigzag. I can't hit it. I tried doing a narrower one and I just can't hit it. It's just too narrow. That's why the 2 seems to work the best for me. Maybe 1.5. I might be able to do 1.5, but 2 works good for me, and it doesn't show that much. So, all right. So let's see. We need to pull my clip off here. Get this all lined up. And head towards the corner. All right, so I'm going to put my finger in the corner here. We're almost done. Yay! Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put a pin over here. This is where we started. I don't like to overlap it too much because it shows, the zigzag kind of shows. So I like to put a pin right where I started so that I know that I need to stop like maybe a stitch or so over that is all. Okay, so we're going to get that lined up. I'm going to pull back on the corner so it lines it up and sew into the corner. See, it doesn't take long to do these little things. I've done a lot of I did a lot of the little, the little bench buddies we did a couple years ago. A lot of those had the binding on it too. So, all right. So I overshot this one again. I'm going to drop my foot, raise my needle, then I'm just going to slide over to the left a little bit. Put my needle back down. There we go. That looks pretty good. And then I will stitch out of the corner, get everything lined up. And out of the corner we come. We're getting very close. Look, we're almost done. I like this binding. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but I thought maybe it was going to be a little too busy, but I think it's okay. The rest of the colors, the rest of the stuff was kind of plainer fabrics. And this one was a little bit busier. Okay, so I'm having a little trouble with this. I've got a little fullness right there. Let's see if I can get it to pull in a little bit. There we go. Okay. Now I don't want to take more than a stitch or so over that pin. There we go. So I'm just going to tie off. And I think we made it around, everybody. All right. So there is our little mini quilt. It is so cute. I'm going to go press just a little bit, and then I will come back and show it to you in the frame, because there wasn't any embellishments for this one, so we didn't have to put anything on the little mini quilt. But look at there. And the other thing I need to do, let me show you on the back here, is I'll take these pins out now. These are the little sleeve. And so I'm going to take this paper off of my heat and bond, and then I'm going to press it down to the back so it adheres here. But I found that because of all this bulk here, that I couldn't get it to adhere where the hem was. So I'm going to take a needle and thread and just put a stitch in this corner and in this corner just to hold it down. And then it's all adhered with the heat and bond from, like from the seam, in between the seams here. So I'll do that off camera, and I'll show you what it looks like in the frame in just a few minutes here. Okay, so here is our little November mini quilt. Look at that. It turned out so cute. I really liked the binding. I wasn't sure. I thought maybe it might look a little bit busy, but I actually really like it because it looks nice with this plaid felt that we did. So anyway, there is our little mini quilt. We are done for the month of November already. Next month is going to be a Christmas quilt. So I was going to show you the picture here. Here's the picture. We're going to do 9 little blocks again, and it looks like sort of like little postage stamps. Those are really cute. So I think that's going to be really fun to do. So that'll be December's mini quilt. We'll do that around the 1st of November. So thank you so much for joining me for the 3rd video of the November Kimberbell Mini Quilt. And I'll see you again around the 1st of November to do the December Mini Quilt. And if you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube. I appreciate that. If you haven't joined my, subscribe to my YouTube channel, I'd really appreciate that as well. And please come join us on Sew Along with Jan. My YouTube channel is called Sew Along with Jan. And also come join us on Facebook and our Facebook group called Sew Along with Jan. So then you can come join us there, and we have all kinds of information and pictures there. So thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day.